الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن سيدنا محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد النبي الأمي وآله وصحبه أما بعد. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to Light Upon Light. We'll continue with Surah Al-Baqarah, chapter 2, and I'm starting with verse 255. It is Ayat Al-Kursi. Allahu la ilaha illa huwa al-hayyu al-qayyum la ta'khudhuhu sinatun wa la nawm lahu ma fi as-samawati wa ma fi al-ard من ذا الذي يشفع عنده إلا بإذنه يعلم ما بين أيديهم وما خلفهم ولا يحيطون بشيء من علمه إلا بما شاء وسع كرسيه السماوات والأرض ولا يؤوده حفظهما وهو العلي العظيم. صدق الله العظيم. It's very important to appreciate the importance of Ayat al-Kursi. You can read this for protection. And before you go to bed, if you read it every night, no Satan, no devil, no evil one will come to you in your sleep, inshaAllah, as confirmed by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Following this, there is an interesting story in verse 258, an argument which took place between Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam and the king of his time. So, Ibrahim was accused of being a troublemaker. He insulted the idols, he damaged them. They tried to burn him alive and they failed. So they brought him to the king. So the king asked him, "Who is your Lord, Ibrahim? Who is your God?" So Ibrahim defined Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from his attributes. And this is very important. Whenever anybody asks you the question, who is your God? And people say, Allah. Yes, but who is he? You need to be able to identify Allah through his attributes, through his qualities, through his work, so that people will know whom we are talking about. So Ibrahim said, Rabbi alladhi yuhyi wa yumit. My Lord is the one who gives life and causes death. So the king said, so what? I can do the same. Guards, bring these two prisoners. One of them was supposed to be killed and the other one was supposed to be released. So he reversed it. He said, the one who was supposed to be killed will be released and the one who was supposed to be released will be killed. So Ibrahim alayhi salam looked at the king and he said, my Lord brings the sun every morning from the east. Can you bring it from the west? Can you reverse the rotation of the earth? فَبُهِتَ الَّذِي كَفَرَ. The unbeliever was fully defeated, because you know the time will come when the sun will rise from the west, when the earth will come to a complete standstill, and then it will start to rotate, and it will take the first day will be equivalent to 1 year as defined by the Prophet ﷺ. And then the second day will be equivalent to 1 month. The third day will be equivalent to 1 week. And then it will be ordinary days. So Ibrahim knew that the sun will come from the west. And these people were pioneers in astronomy. So the challenge was something to do with what they are good at. Another story in verse 259, that was a prophet called Ezra, and he was traveling on his donkey and he passed by Jerusalem after it was completely destroyed. He looked at it and he said, أَنَّا يُحْيِي هَذِهِ اللَّهُ بَعْدَ مَوْتِهِ. How would Allah give life to this city after being completely destroyed, razed to the ground? Question, exclamation anyway. He was not challenging the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what did Allah do? فَأَمَاتَهُ اللَّهُ مِئَةَ عَامٍ ثُمَّ بَعْثَ. Allah made him die for 100 years. What happened to his donkey? It was dead. What happened to his food? Was intact, still hot. 100 years. Then he gave him life. Then he showed him how the donkey was recreated, the skeleton and the flesh, and the food was still the same. So Allah said, وَلِنَجْعَلَكَ آيَةً لِلنَّاسِ, so that we are going to make you a sign unto the people. What did he say when he saw these things happening? قال أعلم أن الله على كل شيء قدير. I know, I am certain that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has power over everything. This is now علم اليقين وعين اليقين وحق اليقين. Now he was sure that this will happen to this city. Allah has the power to give life to the dead. Ibrahim in verse 260 also questioned Allah about giving life to the dead. He said, كيف تحيي الموتى? He said, how do you give life to the dead? He did not say, can you give life to the dead? He said, how? I want to see it. I want to see an experiment. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered him. He said to him, haven't you believed, Ibrahim? أولم تؤمن? You haven't believed? قال بلى, of course I believe. But I want to satisfy my heart. And this is known as حق اليقين. There is علم اليقين, and now it's حق اليقين. He said, okay, take 4 birds of different variety, different species, 4 birds, kill them, mince them, mix them, and put a lamp on each of these 4 mountains. And then call them. They will come running, they will come flying to you. وَاعْلَمْ أَنَّ اللَّهَ عَزِيزٌ حَكِيمٌ. O Ibrahim, know that Allah is exalted in power and wise. This ayah shows that we can use animals or birds or insects to experiment with for the benefit of man. So if we have to test a new drug, or if we have to test a new substance which would improve the quality of life of man, or try to cure cancer or cure AIDS, whatever it is, then some opinions say, some scholars say, yes, if Allah did this with the birds, it's true that Allah gave them life again, but we can do the same for the benefit of man. In the next section, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the importance of giving charity, the importance of spending out of your wealth to help the poor and the needy, and the great reward which is waiting for you as a result of doing this. And if you give charity, then you should not negate your charity or cancel it by reminders of generosity or by injury. And when you give, you must give something which you would accept yourself to take. Don't give the rotten apple to the poor when you will not give the rotten apple to your children. Don't give a damaged clothes to the poor when you yourself will not accept to wear it. Also in these verses, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala condemns usury. And there is no doubt that usury in all its forms is condemned. And there are 2 different types of usury which we need maybe to have another session just to talk about what is usury in relation to bank interest and so on. There are 2 conditions to satisfy. The borrower must be in desperate need to borrow, and the lender exploits the needs of the borrower. These are the 2 conditions to make a transaction, a usury transaction, that you are in need to borrow the money, in desperate need, and the lender is exploiting the needs. In verse 275 of Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala condemns usury. And He describes those who devours it as if they've been possessed by Satan. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clearly states that he made trade as lawful and riba is unlawful. Those who devour usury will not stand except as stands one whom the evil one, Satan, by his touch has driven to madness. That's because they say trade is like usury, but Allah has permitted trade and forbidden usury. So there are two conditions for a transaction to be regarded as a usury transaction. Number one, the borrower must be in desperate need to borrow the money, and the lender exploits the needs of the borrower. So the borrower is in need and the lender is exploiting the needs. There are two types of riba. First one is known as riba nasi. This is when you borrow money from someone and you are going to pay after a period of time, and then if you do not pay on time, then you have to pay an extra amount. Nasi means defer, to defer because of the time. The other one is known as riba al-fadl. This is when you barter commodities. Like, for example, I produce a poor quality dates and someone else produces a high quality dates. So I will give him 5 kilos of the inferior one and I will take from him 1 kilo of the good quality. Prophet ﷺ prohibited us from doing this. He said, go and sell your produce in the open market, catch the right price, and then go and buy whatever you would like to buy. So this is known as riba al-fadl, and it is mainly regarding commodities: barley, corn, maize, wheat, raisins, dates, and so on. So unfortunately, some people today would do this, would actually try to lend people money using a false transaction. Like, for example, someone would say, I would like to buy from you, I'll sell this pen to you for £1,000. So they bring a fictitious item in the middle to make it look as if it is a trade transaction. But the intention between them was a usury transaction. And this is a form of riba, which many people, unfortunately, are doing it these days. We are going to stop for a break. And thank you for being with me. And please join me after the short break. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.